Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collowood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. I'm here to give my reaction and review to episode 42. So if you're watching this on Tubi, this would be season 2, episode 7. um, Written by Francis Swan. By the way, I did forget to mention in my last video that Francis Swan uh, wrote the previous episode. So Francis Swan started with his first writing assignment of the show was episode 41. Um, Now he's back for episode 42. John Sedgwick is still here as director. So here we go, guys. Let's get going. So we see a shot, you know, a shot that's away from the Seaview Terrace, and now it's going forward. Again, you'll see John Sedgwick do that a lot. Oh yeah, and you know, remember when Roger Collins told Sam Evans to stay away from Collinwood and the people up there? About that. Actually, at the end of the previous episode, uh, Sam makes his appearance at the door of the old house. He knocks, and then Liz answers the door. This is again, every episode you see picks up generally from where the previous left off. And again, as I've discussed before, just because you're seeing a new episode doesn't mean you're seeing a different day. I believe we're on day 4, so it's hard to keep track of it. I believe that's what day we're on. We're on day 4 of Dark Shadows. It's crazy, but it is. So Liz Liz is looking at him, and I love how John Sedgwick is shooting this. You get the back of Elizabeth's head, you see her hair all pulled up in a bun, and you see David Ford's face. You see Sam Evans standing at the entrance of the doorway. He's standing outside still. He says, "I'm looking for Roger Collins." And he's not at home. Elizabeth tells him, "Are you expecting him?" He asks. "Sometime later. You could probably find him at the cannery." Metal clash. So you had something got dropped behind the scenes on set. Liz asked Sam, "Does he never?" He says, "I'm forgetting my manners. My name is Sam Evans, the painter." Uh, and she asks, I love how Liz does that too here in this episode. She asks, "You have to beg my pardon. We haven't met in some time." So she remembers. This is really interesting here because she remembers Sam's face. And we do get a couple episodes ago where Sam had mentioned he hadn't seen Elizabeth in a long time, and Elizabeth hasn't heard. It's not like you know Elizabeth hears Sam's voice every day, so it's been a long time. It's been about 18 years. Um, so there is that Sam has not seen Elizabeth in a long time, um, and he said, "I've changed since that time." And she says, "Won't you come in, Mr. Evans?" Um, he says, "Are you sure I'm not disturbing you?" She says, "No, at all." Elizabeth closes the drawing room doors. I love that little switch of the camera angle we see. It starts off with a close up of Elizabeth. They pull back. They pull back, and you see both of them in the frame, and they're standing next to each other. Again, you see the back of Elizabeth's head. But you also see the side of Elizabeth there. There's a nice shot of Joan's face, and it's a bit of a close. It's not a close up, but it's a bit of a close up. You see Sam Evans talking too, so they're going back and forth. Then they pull back, and you see both. Great job by John Sedgwick and Dan Curtis Productions. I don't want to not give anybody any credit in this episode. So Sam tells her, I about how Roger could be in some serious trouble, and he says it concerns 10 years ago. And he says, "What are you?" She asks, "What are you after? Money?" He says, "No, no, no more money." "Oh well, then what do you want?" And I love David Ford's line here, Sam Evans, "I want to save my soul." You better be ready to save your soul. I love how John Sedgwick, again, Laura Parker had given an interview where she said the actors couldn't hear the music, and true, but I love how Elizabeth is gesturing toward the drawing room, and I love how you hear the music. She walks in, and the camera doesn't follow her because they're closing in on Sam Evans' face. Great job. And that's the intro. all that all that is just the intro alone. 5 minutes, right? Really 2 minutes if you're watching on TV. So there's things I paused so I could talk. I don't want to feel like I'm talking over them. I know I've watched this episode, but still, I want to get in all my points about these episodes. She says, "Well, Mr. Evans." So Sam says when he enters the drawing room, this is the first time he's been in this room. It's beautiful. She says it's dark and gloomy. Please get to the point. Liz is always straight to the point. He says it is a beautiful room. They're all ancestral portraits. He points out. Elizabeth, yes. Do you know that your so we get a bit of backstory here to a degree. We don't get a flashback, but Sam says, "Do you know your husband asked me to paint his portrait?" And Elizabeth says, "Paul?" And she says, "Yeah." She's shocked that that happened. She didn't know about it. Yes, I remember the distinct. He mentioned the size he wanted. It was the same size of the portrait of Jeremiah. He says, "I believe I have some clear sketches. If you guys can find them, perhaps you'd be interested." And she says, No, I don't want to see them." I love how when Joan does that, because the camera is pulled back to see them both, and she's looking at him. And when he mentions about he has some drawings, would you like to see them? She says no, and she turns away, and you see the guilt-ridden look on Elizabeth's face as Sam is talking. And yes, Sam is in the same frame as her, and they're talking. He's talking about Burke. How someone asked me to mention the size he wanted. It was identical to the same one. So Liz says you don't find many people who could afford a portrait. Is it a local one? And Sam says, yeah, you might know him. He's friends with your brother. And Elizabeth says, you mean Burke Devlin? He says, yes. Did you agree to do the portrait? Liz asks. Burker's a very persuasive fellow. Very, very good. He says, now it will mean several days of sittings. I wondered if he mentioned he'd come back to consult. Sam says, well, it's his home, which is true. Elizabeth doesn't think Burke would be content to settle on a time and place like this. The Sam says, I suppose he has his reasons. She asked Sam for a drink. He said, be sure it's no trouble. My brother keeps quite a supply on hand. He likes to drink himself. Sometimes and Sam says, yes, I know. So we go from the Collinwood, and we're in Bangor, Maine. We're in the hotel where Burke is going to meet his lawyer, Mr. Blair. Will Bronson be joining us? I don't think so. So would you like to order? Burke's like, no, I'd like to have a drink. Burke asks Mr. Blair, what do you got for me? As they're sitting across from each other. Again, this is John Sedgwick, Dan Curtis Productions. They have the camera pulled back enough that you see the entryway to the restaurant, you see the little area where the looks like where a phone is. It's very, I believe that's a telephone to where people would call the restaurant. It looks like a telephone from here. And you see the flowers to the left. You see another table where there's no one sitting. You also see another table where there's a couple sitting, a man and a woman. So they're showing that this restaurant is a bit busy. Mr. Blair said about the outstanding debts, and Burke, we can call them, and Burke says this will give me complete control of the Collins Cannery. And Blair said, unless you want to go further, and Burke says, I want to go further, much further. Here comes the waiter with the glasses of drink. Thank you. And here's Carolyn. There's Nancy Barrett's character. She's sitting at the table that was empty. She says, I'm expecting someone to join me. She sees Burke sitting there putting a cigarette in his mouth. I really enjoy how John Sedgwick shot this episode and how Dan Curtis Production shot again, there's a lot of different set designs on this small soundstage that they use. And again, Cy Thomasoff, you really see his art form at work with these episodes that you watch, because you see these beautiful set designs. We've been seeing Collinwood for a while. We hadn't got a new set design in a couple episodes, and now we get a restaurant in Bangor, Maine. And again, we get different people too. Dark Shadows would have extras at times, and it's nice to see, like, there is an outside world to Collinsport, and as Patrick McRae has pointed out, it's the outsiders who could affect Collinwood the most, and I agree, especially the people who get let into the door of Collinwood. But that outside world, can affect Collinsport, which again, Burke, who grew up in Collinsport, went away. He came back from the outside world. Victoria Winters got called to Collinwood again from the outside world. It's really, really great psychology that I enjoy very much. So I'm waiting for the episode to return as the commercial rolls on here. So they're sitting there. Burke is looking over the papers. I actually like how we see other guests coming in too. It wasn't just first we saw Carolyn, and now we see another couple come in. We see it. Well, there was a couple on the left. Now there's a couple that goes around Carolyn, and they're on the other side. Burke says he checks out the people higher, then he leaves the details to them. I'm satisfactory, I hope, Mr. Blair says. You wouldn't be sitting there if it wasn't. Mr. Devlin, I'm ready to move when you give me the word. I think Mr. Harris at the bank is expecting a call from me. There's no possibility of him connecting you with him. Not the slightest, Mr. Blair says. All he knows is a New York investment company is interested in acquiring notes and mortgages. When do I start? Well, there's not much rush. So Burke says there's no rush. Part of the prize I get for bringing down the Collins enterprise is the anticipation of doing it. Great line. Great line. Mr. Blair takes a drink. Carolyn is applying some makeup. No, she doesn't need it. She does. So he says, Blair, the thing I like about is you're thorough. You never ask any questions. He says, good. Most have noticed that the big house itself, Collingwood, I suppose, try putting, not at all. So we learned that Elizabeth has acquired about putting up, but not as a liability, meaning the house. Who would want a big house like that unless somebody resort motel or something? We learned Elizabeth. We learned from Mr. Blair that Elizabeth put in a petition for the property taxes to be reduced. Reason was for half houses shut off and not being used. Burke and a petition granted. Yes, Mr. Blair said yes, it was. Burke says, I'm not surprised that family owns everything there is to own in that town except me. Mr. Blair says, and what do you want to see that reverse? You want to own everything there is to own except them? And Burke says, nope, including them. Now shall we eat? And Burke looks and sees Carolyn. And she smiles and nods. He says, excuse me. He's walking over to Carolyn. Tells him, hi, surprised. He says, not really. She says, won't you sit down? He says, yes, I think I better. Sam is still at Collinwood. He's drinking. He says, I needed that. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. You're quite welcome. Now, if you're such refreshed, suppose you tell me why you came. Well, I am. Now Sam's scared and nervous. I wanted to see the portraits I've heard so much about. Elizabeth, nonsense. I'm not a mind reader. Mr. Evans, what do you want? He says, well, he says, I want to tell you about something I learned, you might say accidentally. Well, come to me. Who else? Why not keep it to yourself? Well, that's the trouble. I've kept it too long. So again, he's saying about the 10 years ago. Liz says, I don't certainly want enough to this my family. He says, I have no idea what you expect to gain by coming here. I knew you had sunk low. Liz is accusing him of wanting to sell information. There's a knock at the door. Liz, I love the tracking shot we get because we saw there's Joe Haskell, who Liz asked for in the previous episode. I love the tracking shot we get there, how Liz walks out of the drawing room, and before we cut away from Sam, we see Sam in the frame taking that drink, and then it cuts away as she's walking toward further into the foyer and toward the door. There's Joe Haskell, obviously. Liz closes the door. It's about Carolyn. Have you seen her? No, but I have a pretty good idea of where she is. Where she might be. Joe Haskell. Good old Joe. He's honest. He said you knew where Carolyn was. He said, look, mister, I don't want to sound like a spy. I'm worried about her. She left. She's not home for dinner. And you thought she might have had a date with me. Or with whom? Alright, I'll tell you. Joe says earlier she was in the restaurant birthday. Later, a friend of mine told me he spotted her in her car on the road to Bangor. Perhaps she had some shopping to do. Yeah, maybe Burke had some shopping to do. So Joe is insinuating that Carolyn followed Burke to Bangor. And he's right. Because a friend of Joe's saw her driving her car to Bangor, following Mr. Devlin's car. Liz says, I'll speak to Carolyn when she gets home. He says, if she gets home, I don't think it's that bad. Liz says, it's bad. It's bad. Liz asked Joe to go in and speak to Sam. He said there's a drink in there if you want. Or Liz says there's a drink in there if you want. And Liz is going to get on the phone. Burke, we're back at the restaurant now. Burke says it's quite a coincidence. Well, it could have been a coincidence. I came here a lot. Yeah, but today it wasn't. And she says, no, it wasn't. I mean, you can really tell that they're doing a great job, and they've done a great job of building Carolyn's natural infatuation and attraction to Burke. And it really is more heavy-handed on this episode than in any other episode. I'm not saying it's not heavy-handed in any other episode, but more specifically in this one, Carolyn has, to me, completely let go of doubting Burke or questioning him. She's attracted to him. Burke says, why should you care what I do? But I told you I simply was curious. She's like, oh, you're the one to blame. You're acting so mysterious all over town. There's nothing mysterious about my trip to anger. Again, to Bert, in Burke's mind, he's playing the very tactics that the Collins play. The lying, the going behind their back, trying to pretend to be their friend. Now, Roger and Liz don't buy it, but Carolyn does, and that sort of makes her not just a danger to herself, but a danger to her own family. Burke has invited her over to sit with Mr. Blair to their table. Smooth operator. And Mr. Blair stands up. This is Carolyn Stoddard. This is Carolyn Collins Stoddard. Blair looks on his face. Is like, wait, what? So Burke says Mr. Blair is a notorious swindler who's here to help me get your mother out of her family business. And Carolyn just laughs about it. I like Blair's smile though too, when he was sort of playing along. Now he says Mr. Blair is an old friend from New York. Invited me up here for a drink. Fortunately, Mr. Blair is on a point, don't you, Mr. Blair? Miss Blair says yes with our mother and alibi. Can you please give me a moment, Mr. Devlin? Blair, forgive me for not joining you, but business before pleasure. I like that Carolyn accused him of him getting rid of Blair because of her, and Burke says, why? You're much prettier than he is. Carolyn, are you putting me on, Burke? Why on earth would I do that? Carolyn, I act like a child. Following here, and Carolyn says, please don't treat me like one. Carolyn, like a girl who you really are interested. Splendid. Let's start by ordering a lunch, Burke says. He orders salad, baked potato, and steak. French fries instead of a baked potato. Burke. Burke has that pen in his hand that Blair gave him. That Blair has the only other pen. It's a really great job of Mitch Ryan displaying the pen and pointing it around, making sure the camera gets it, and it's a great job of Dan Curtis Productions and John Sedgwick filming the camera. Burke says, "How was this lunch date arranged?" Uh, Carolyn, what, Your Honor? The prisoner did none of this, and I alone am to blame. Again, great job with the pen. They have a close. They were pulled back. Now they have a close up of it, and he gives Carolyn the pen as a present. Carolyn says, "That was just for fun. You giving me a pen," and Burke says, "I never do anything for fun." Carolyn said, "It must have cost a lot, and I wouldn't give you anything that didn't cost a lot." I like how she does give him the pen back, and he's handing it back to her. Again, the pen is in that frame, and and he gives it back to her, and she's looking at the pen. You do see the pen go in and out of the frame. I think what Nancy Barrett is really doing is she's showing the admiration of what he just gave her. It's a great job by her. He said, "The penny's yours." And there's a close up of the pen finally. And she takes off the cap too. Puts both on. There's Liz. Are you sure Mr. Malloy isn't there somewhere? Oh, very well. If you see him, ask him to call Mrs. Stoddard. It's important. Now people are looking for Bill Malloy, more specifically Liz. Elizabeth opens. Joe was sitting down. He stands up. And Sam Evans, "Malloy, what do you want with him? He manages my company." Sam says no. He doesn't know. Liz tells him, "Stop beating around the bush. Tell me what you want." He's like, "Well," with Mr. Evans' attitude. And Sam turns away. He's like, "I can't do it." And he walks away. He leaves Collinwood. He can't tell her. Joe says that Mr. Evans didn't say a word. I love Elizabeth's line here. She says, "The worst part about a secret is not being able to reveal it to anybody. And when he can no longer stand keeping it to himself, he'll tell us." I think that's a great line. And I love how Jonas postured her face. She's not just talking about Sam, she's talking about herself too. And that's the end of the episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed the review. I'm going to do another episode here in a little bit.